welcome Steve Harrison, who won the Lee Medal in 2024 for his presentation on the Philatelic Congress of Great Britain. And he has updated this presentation for us today. And you're taking us all the way from 1909 to the future, September 2026. So over to you, Steve.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Helen said, I'm Steve Harrison, and I've had an interest in this thing called the Philatelic Congress of Great Britain for quite a few years now. And I'm going to take you through a very, very quick history of it, as it says on the first slide there. So, what is the Philatelic Congress of Great Britain? Well, the first one was held in Manchester in 1909. And it was organised by something called the Manchester branch of the Junior Philatelic Society. So there were these group of philatelists up in Manchester, and they thought, well, around this time now, there's a lot of philatelic societies being established all over the country. Wouldn't it be a good idea if we got together and started to talk about stamps and other things and just sort of get to know each other and build philately? So in February 1909, they held a meeting at Hume Town Hall. And as you can see, there's a picture there of the building itself, now demolished, with stamp exhibition, February the 18th, 19th and 20th, 1909. And that was the first Congress. Now then, have a look at these guys. The top left is the actual organising committee. And as you can probably see, the basic qualification for being a member of this committee was to have a very large moustache or even a beard. There might be one or two people you recognise. The third in from the left, that's the Earl of Crawford. That's the Lord Mayor of Manchester in the middle. And the bottom picture is of the opening ceremony at the first Congress. It does tickle me that that little white sign you can see pinned up says "No smoking, please." At this first Congress, the post office provided a temporary post office at Hume Town Hall and provided a hand stamp. And there is what is purported to be the first impression of the special hand stamp. It's on an international reply coupon, and it's signed at the side on the right there by Isidore Bernstein, who was the chairman of the first Congress. I always find it difficult because I've got another collection, a side collection of reply coupons, and I never think, well, should it be in this collection or that collection? But it's here today for this. You noticed as well, the original advertisement said postage stamp exhibition and philatelic congress. And for each person that lent material to show at the first Congress, they received this rather magnificent certificate signed by Albrecht, the secretary, and Bernstein, the president. And actually, this is one of only two known that still exist of that. A nice souvenir to have for those people. It was Mr. Higgins who that was presented to. I like to collect ephemera, and this is the lapel badge of the secretary of the Manchester Junior Philatelic Society that he wore during Congress. And like all good philatelists, he's turned it over, put a stamp on it, and used the hand stamp on it. So it's correctly used. And as you can see, it's a nice hand stamp, postage stamp exhibition in Congress, Manchester. And that's 10 p.m. on February the 20th, 1909. They produced a souvenir postcard, which is on the left. And this is the first handbook that was produced. And for every subsequent Congress, literally every subsequent Congress, there has been a handbook like that. You'll notice keen philatelist again, postage stamp on the front, cancellation of the hand stamp. Just an amusing little postcard, this, I think. I thought I had a stamp of me and it's stuck on his head. Never mind. But there is, towards the right-hand side, a nice copy of the Congress hand stamp. 5:20 p.m. on February the 18th. So it was a success. It worked. It seemed to generate quite a bit of enthusiasm for philately. So they decided in the following year, 1910, to hold another Congress. But one feature that has always been of Congresses, and it's still true now, that it moves from venue to venue all around the country and on occasion abroad as well. Now, we didn't have any labels for the 1909, the first Congress, but in 1910, London it moved to. We had these lovely, I think they're beautifully designed, beautifully produced labels, but they were printed by Perkins Bacon. And it's interesting to note as we go on through the years, I think, that all the leading printers, Perkins Bacon, Delarue, and that particularly good printers called Harrison, are represented. They were prepared to produce material for Congress. And as you can see, it was based on a fiscal stamp that had already been produced. So I suppose you could argue that Perkins Bacon had the head in stock. I'm lucky enough, well, yeah, lucky enough to have this dye-proof copy printed in black on white clays card from Perkins Bacon. And I just looking at that, I think it's just a beautiful design. In the museum at the Royal Philatelic Society, London, there's something called the Perkins Bacon Archive. And part of that archive includes the what are called the day books. These are the books that were kept in the workshops so that as somebody completed a job, they'd write it down. And then if you look at that scan, hopefully you can see, if can I point to it? Yeah, there, you'll see that they've all been priced up. And there are two jobs that I've put red arrows on. The first is to design stamps for the Second Philatelic Congress of Great Britain, 10 and sixpence. So that's not bad, really, when you think about it. 10 and sixpence to design those two stamps. And on the 11th of April, engrave of souvenir stamp for the Peace Sock Congress, £3, 10 shillings. Not a bad price for the engraving work, I would suggest. They were produced in sheets of 12, and there's just an example of one of the colours in a complete sheet. Now, interestingly enough, there was just one single sheet like this printed in gold, and it was presented to the Prince of Wales, the then Prince of Wales, later King George V, because I think quite a lot of you will know how interested George V was in stamp collecting. Now, it's supposed to have gone into the Royal Collection, the Royal Philatelic Collection, that sheet there, but it hasn't been seen for quite some time. As I said, for the first Congress, handbooks were produced. This is the front cover of the handbook for the second Congress, and you'll notice on the pillars, if you look carefully, that you've got all the names of the philatelic societies that attended, and you'll notice the pastiche at the top in between the columns, the already cover pastiche. Another feature that's grown over the years, and this backs up a theory of mine that there's a connection between philately, red wine, and food, that at each Congress, there's quite a big banquet at the end of the event, and this is the menu, the front of the menu for the 1910 London Second Congress. The label stamp motif that was put onto the front, you can see, was based on the Newfoundland stamp of 1862. Quite a nice interpretation, I think, that. This is the invitation to the banquet that was sent out, Uh, it was being sort of sponsored, supported by the Hearts Philatelic Society. So you can see that it's gone from the Hearts Philatelic Society, and they're requesting the pleasure of Mr. J.S. Higgins Jr. It was a nice venue. It was the International Hall at the Cafe Monaco. Yeah, I would imagine it was quite a good evening. 1911, third one, came to a fantastic place called Birmingham, centre of the universe, centre of the country. And these labels were produced for the third Congress. They were produced locally, and on the right is the front cover of the handbook that was produced. And it was alleged that the cover was based on Curzon Street Station. You can see a picture of that, the remains of it on the left. And it's interesting that it says that when I was researching this, that that front of Curzon Street Station would form part of the HS2 complex when it opens in, gosh, 2026. Well, if you catch a train out of Birmingham nowadays and go past the site, I think the date is probably more like 2036. Never let philatelists near philatelic souvenirs, because you end up with reversed colours, top right, inverted centre, left, and overprints. And there they've taken the Birmingham Delivery Company, the sixpenny label, and overprinted it. Never let philatelists near philatelic souvenirs. Little story about these pieces that you see in front of you. They're taken, their detail taken from two covers. I've got that cover on the left, and the cover on the right is part of the Francis Kiddle Congress collection that, when Francis died, was donated to the Royal Philatelic Society, London. And you can see that somebody, as philatelists will, have bisected two stamps and used the different halves on different covers. One day I propose to put those two covers next door to each other and take a photograph, but for the minute, that's where they're at. One's in Birmingham, one's in London. One aspect of congresses, and it's still true over the years, right up to date, is that not only is it philatelic stuff, but it's visits, trips out. And here, the whole of Congress went to Cadbury's, which of course is in a suburb of Birmingham called Bourneville. And there we have, ladies and gentlemen, a group of philatelists from the Birmingham 19, where are we? Sorry, the 1911 Congress. Now, on the right-hand side, that picture you see there, the lady is the Countess of Warwick. In 1911, Warwick Castle was still a private home, as one has. And the Countess invited the whole of Congress to Warwick Castle for afternoon tea. And the chap in the boater facing her is Richard Hollick, who was the chairman of Congress. I should add the Countess of Warwick was a good, in inverted commas, friend of the king. I'll say no more. At the end of Congress, a unique book was presented to the Countess of Warwick, and you can see a postcard was presented there. And it had all the bits and pieces, the labels, the picture postcards, original photographs, the banquet menu, all the bits and pieces, and it was all put into one book. And I'm very, very fortunate in having that Countess of Warwick book in my collection. 1912, we move on. It went to the seaside, which has been a theme running through congresses, I would say, from 1912. And it was held at the Queen's Highcliffe Hotel. as you can see it from the souvenir postcard on the left. And it was under the auspices of the Isle of Thanet Philatelic Society. And that on the right is the front page of the handbook. Now, it's quite interesting that the labels produced for this Congress were produced by Perkins Bacon, but with these triangular Tesh pairs. And as you can see there, we have 6 colours. But again, never let philatelists close to philatelic souvenirs because they're printed in reverse colours. The guy there, Albert Leonardut, was the organizer of the Congress, but just happened to be the managing director of the Queen's Highcliffe Hotel. So, in other words, he held Congress at the hotel he was managing director of. Having said that, he was a founder and president of the Isle of Thanet Philatelic Society. He was mayor of Margate, Congress chairman, and a fellow of the Royal. But I think you would call him what was, well, politely, it's called an entrepreneur, isn't it? But what's, well, funny to me is not only did he have these labels produced, but he also asked Perkins Bacon to print these advertising labels for, guess where? Yes, Queen's Highcliffe Hotel, his hotel. I don't think many hotels have had advertising labels printed by Perkins Bacon. And again, never let these souvenirs get close to philatelists, because at the Congress, there was a company that did perforating machines giving demonstrations, and you ought to see what they did to some of these sheets. Oh, that's a cover with the 6 souvenir labels on, and you'll notice that they put some, what should I say, correct postage stamps on it to take the Philatelic Congress hand stamp, because theoretically it was against regulations to just cancel the labels with the Congress hand stamp. An example there, yes, New Hebrides 5 and 10 cent with downy head bisect and heads missing. It's, well, you know what philatelists do. And this is actually a unique item. It's a postal order, believe it or not, cancelled at the Margate Congress, 8:45 p.m., 3rd of May, 1912. It's an indicator of the times in which they lived in 1912, that on the side plate of all gentlemen attending the banquet was an envelope, as you see in front of you, containing a cigar. And at the end of the meal, everybody tore open their envelopes and smoked their cigars. That isn't done at Congress anymore. Edinburgh in 1913, it went right up north. And as you can see, a very, very ornate front to the banquet menu. It was at the Balmoral Hotel in Princes Street. And on the right-hand side, you've got the handbook, price 6pence. Not too bad at all. 1914, they were starting to be difficult times in 1914, of course, and there was no labels, there was no Congress hand stamp in 1914, but this engraving was produced, which is enlarged on the left-hand side there, and was used on the front cover of the handbook for 1914. And you can see, reading that the 6th Philatelic Congress in London was under the auspices of the Royal Philatelic Society, London, at the premises then in Southampton Row. And the patron, as you can see there in 1914, was His Majesty the King. In 1920, we're jumping from 1914. Obviously, there were no congresses during the First World War, and we go to Newcastle upon Tyne in 1920. That's an example of the label or set of labels. They were different colours produced, and on the right hand side you've got the handbook for the 7th Philatelic Congress of Great Britain. And it's quite interesting when you think about the years preceding that at the bottom there is the single word Pax, peace, because that's what had come in 1920. 1921, it moved up to Harrogate, and several things happened at Harrogate of note. First of all, there weren't any labels produced. That label there on the left-hand side was produced actually by the town publicity office for Congress. And let me explain what that thing is on the right-hand side. The role of Distinguished Philatelists, the RDP, was established in 1920, and that is the actual role of Distinguished Philatelists. The first names to be added to it were 43 deceased philatelists who were of note, and they were the fathers of philately. So make the point that it was the Philatelic Congress of Great Britain that was responsible for the birth of the RDP. Both, of course, Congress and the RDP still going. In fact, as some of you will be aware, the names of the new 4 RDPs was announced, I think it was yesterday, and congratulations to those 4. 1922, we jump down to Bath. And on the left, we have the front cover of the handbook, 1840, 1922, Bath, coaches, aircraft. And that is one of the overprints that was produced to publicise the event. Go to Bath, 9th Philatelic Congress. And it was on for 4 days in June, as you can see. Glasgow, 1924 we've jumped to now. And as you can see, some labels were produced for those. Now, this may be of interest to some collectors who don't realise it should be of interest. Those labels, and there's a set of 4 different colours produced in miniature sheets, were produced by a company called McClure MacDonald and Company in Glasgow. But it's interesting that they were actually producers of postage stamps, and in fact were the company, McClure MacDonald and Company, who printed the first stamps of Sarawak. And I believe there are a few collectors who are interested in Sarawak. So if you're a real Sarawak collector, should you have these Congress labels in your collection to illustrate other items that have been printed by the company who produced the first stamps of Sarawak? Nottingham, we turn to in 1927. No labels were produced. A hand stamp was, and there's a nice clear example there, 5:45 p.m., 21st of June, 1927. It does strike me, compared with hand stamps you get nowadays, how clear and tidy and clean these hand stamps were. And you can see that's going to Prague in Czechoslovakia. Now, as I've said, never let philatelists and Congress get together, because in 1927 they took the group of philatelists who attended Congress on a visit to the GPO sorting office. Somebody found a piece of paper, and as they walked round the sorting office, sort of picked anything up that they could see and made a hand stamp of it. So you've got that, what I would call philatelic souvenir of the GPO sorting office from Nottingham. 1928, something was introduced that lasted for many, many years. As you can see on the right, it was the first common format Philatelic Congress handbook. And this handbook, as you can see there, the format was continued for many, many years. It contained copies of all the papers that were going to be presented at Congress. And this event in 1928 actually ran concurrently with the 1928 London International. Move back to the seaside and we go to Torquay. On the left is the souvenir postcard that was produced, and on the right is the front of the banquet menu. Now, to me, this is 1930. That epitomizes artwork, illustration from the 1930s. I think that that front of that banquet menu is absolutely superb. It was held at the Palace Hotel where Congress was being held, and 7:15 Friday, June the 27th, 1930. And bearing in mind this is 1930, that's what a group of philatelists looks like in 1930 with the mayor of Torquay. Notice there aren't all that many big moustaches, so things have changed a little bit. If any of you are into historic philatelists, you'll see one or two faces that perhaps you recognize. But that's the way philatelists looked in 1930. 1931, a ridiculous item, but again, you know what philatelists get up to. You can see that it's cancelled 25th of June 1931. Leicester, there's the hand stamp on the stamps, but it's commemorating Portsmouth Navy Week, 1st to the 8th, 1931. Now we get to what I would consider to be my favourite set of labels. This is the 1933 Congress that was held in London, and you can see there that 7 different colours of label were issued. The design of the postman knocking on the door was taken from an illustration on a piece of sheet music, and the song was called The Postman's Knock. I will save you from the ordeal of listening to me sing that, but there's the illustration on the left. Now, the interesting thing was, well, 2 things, I think. First of all, these were printed by De La Rue. So if you're a collector of De La Rue, should you have these labels in your collection? And also, not only were there 7 different colors, they were printed, each was printed on a different type of paper. So you can see on that explanatory sheet in the middle, the black, top left, was on wove handmade, wove machine made, laid, pelure, wove, laid, quadrille. So not only were they different colors, they were different papers. And if you turn each of them over and lay them together, you can distinctly see that they are different papers. 1935 was a place called Bath. And again, those were printed by Perkins Bacon. And on the right there, I've got a proof, die proof, of the outline of the one portrait label. 1940, I've jumped from 1935 to 1940. In 1940, was supposed to have been held in London, but for obvious reasons, it was moved away from London to Bournemouth. But somebody did say to me recently, well, moving it to Bournemouth, that's still on the coast and it's still quite near this place called Germany. But anyway, you can see there that a label was produced, and again, these were by De La Rue. I'm amused by the 2 tickets I illustrate on the right. Tickets to, first of all, the Philatelic Writers' Breakfast at the Royal Bath Hotel. And that was from 8:30 till 10:30 a.m. They finished at 10:30 a.m. so that there was 3/4 of an hour to get ready for the philatelist service at St. Peter's Church, conducted by the Reverend Canon Headley Burrows, and the preacher was the Reverend C.S. Morton. Now, Morton was a bit of a character. Although he was an ordained priest, he never actually had a parish of his own. He sort of did cover, shall we call it, but seemed to have a very good philatelic collection. And he was secretary of the Congress Committee for quite some time. There in 1946, sorry, yeah, there in 1946, which we jump to now, is a view of the organising committee. And notice that one person, oh, there's Morton in the middle. You can see his dog collar. And you notice his next door neighbour is smoking. People don't smoke now at Congress. And 1946 was the first time, and the only time actually, that a specific registration label was produced specially for Congress, as well as that hand stamp that you can see there. And I'm afraid, yes, I do have a separate collection of the registration labels. 1948, it moved to Bournemouth. The labels were printed by probably the world's most incredible printing company called Harrison. And there's a couple of examples there. It was under the auspices of the Bournemouth and District Philatelic Society. And one tradition that's built up over the years at Congress is that during the banquet, the menus are passed round and people sign them. And there's from 1950, the Tunbridge Wells version there. 1952, it was in Southampton. And on the right-hand side there, you can see the order of business for the RDP meeting that was held within. And you can see there the role of Distinguished Philatelist 1952 under the auspices of the Philatelic Congress of Great Britain. And you can see the headings of the names there. Southampton was in 1952. I never thought in a presentation or a philatelic display that I would ever include a beer mat. The Congress was held at the Polygon Hotel, as you can see. A keen philatelist found one of their beer mats, put a stamp on it, and then put the hand stamp on the beer mat. It's got to be included. At least they got it fairly well centered, just a tad off. And on the left-hand side, you can see yet another signed menu for the annual banquet. And if we'd had time, we'd go through all those, and probably quite a few you'd recognise. An unusual item from 1953. 1953, a particularly good year. And this is a Commonwealth reply coupon with an excellent strike of the hand stamp used for Whitley Bay, the where are we, the 35th Philatelic Congress. And then moving on to 1956, Congress moved to Brighton, and there we have top left the special cover that was produced for it, with a nice clear strike yet again of the hand stamp on some postal stationery. And below is a postcard illustrating the Indian Gate at the Royal Pavilion in Brighton. And I'm pleased to say that on the right, I've got there the original artwork for that cover. Beautifully produced, just in pen. 1959 was, of course, the Golden Jubilee of Congress. 1959, 1909. So at that, the Queen was the patron of the event, but something called the Congress Medal was inaugurated and has been awarded at every Congress since to an outstanding philatelist of the time. And on the right there, I show, and these are produced on Philatelic Congress of Great Britain notepaper, sort of draft designs for the Congress medal. And in the end, it wasn't circular, a design similar, but not quite the same, similar to the bottom right design, the rectangular one, was actually used. Jumping to 1961, it went to Blackpool. There's a copy of the special cover that was produced for it, Philatelic Congress. And it's addressed to a man called George J. King. And I think if it wasn't for George King, we wouldn't have a lot of the philatelic bits and pieces that we do have. On the right-hand side is the souvenir postcard that was produced with a very affable greetings from Congress at the bottom. However, I don't know how many of you would agree with me that the hotel where they stayed looked very much like a prison block to me. I can imagine being locked up in there. So I'm going to bounce straight from there, 61 to 97, when it was held in Coventry. And some of you may remember Gavin Fryer. He gave a talk dressed as, in first person, as George Higlet, who had been an early philatelist. You can see in that picture of Gavin playing George, you can see on the wall there a picture of George Higlet. He wrote some quite amusing stories about his collections. On the right-hand side, you have the banquet menu with the hand stamp of that year's Congress, cancelling those stamps, well, labels that are on the front there. So from 97, we leap on to the year 2000. And in 2000, the Congress was sponsored by the Revenue Society. Hence, on the left-hand side, the labels, I suppose you'd call them, issued as a souvenir are revenue stamps from 20-cent revenue stamps, law stamps from Canada. And on the right-hand side, you have the Congress banquet menu with a hand stamp there, the Revenue Society, the Philatelic Congress of Great Britain, London 2000. Jumping forward to 2008, Congress went to Stratford-on-Avon, and more important than the Philatelic Congress of Great Britain was a chap called Shakespeare. So the labels for that year were based on Shakespeare, as you can see there. And on the right-hand side there, even on the Congress handbook, on the front cover, there was a picture of Shakespeare's birthplace. Moving on to 2009, Manchester. That's the souvenir postcard that was produced on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, we have the front cover of the handbook that was produced. Portsmouth in 2011. Now, Portsmouth in 2011 celebrated the 1911 Congress on its postcard, the souvenir postcard there. And you'll remember that you've seen quite a few of those illustrations on that postcard earlier on. There's the bisected stamps. There's the town hall, bottom right, bottom left, the label with the town hall, and the Grand Hotel in Birmingham, which is by the cathedral in Birmingham city centre. And I didn't say this when we were looking at the 1911 labels, but I have to smile that Congress was held at the Grand Hotel in 1911. And last year, for the 2025 show that we had at the NEC in Birmingham, the Palmares was held in exactly the same room at the Grand Hotel as the Congress banquet in 1911. So that Grand Hotel, I think you could do a philatelic sort of 16 sheets on that. And then we come right up to this year, because in September this year, we have the 107th Philatelic Congress. It's in September, as you can see. It's going to be at the Jubilee Hotel in Nottingham. It's 4 days, 4, 5, and 6. As you can see from the bottom of that screen, there's quite a lot going on. And if you need more information, the easiest way is probably go to the ABPS website, and there's a whole pile of information with the booking forms and further details about all the events and what's going to be on there. You'll see we've got the new RDPs who will be there. We've got local societies entertaining. We've got the Kay Goodman lecture, which looks at an aspect of philately. But more than anything, it's a very, very, very pleasant social event as well. And it links philately and the social side of philately very, very well. It's like going into a room and just seeing friends who you've not seen for ages. I would encourage anybody who's not been, have a taste of it, see what it's like. It's good fun. It's good fun. And it does link that triangle again, philately, food, and wine. And that is the end of my presentation. But just to end on this, I wonder what these guys from 1909 would think to where we've got to with Congress nowadays. Um, I did suggest when I was chairman of the Congress Organising Committee a few years ago that we all grew moustaches, but nobody would listen to me. So I'm afraid I have no moustache. And that's where I end that.
There's a couple of questions that have come through. So
Right?
are there philatelic congresses of other countries like the Philately Congress of France? And how do these differ from the Great Britain one?
Yes, there are congresses all around the world, in actual fact. How do they differ? Um, I don't think that they do differ really, because the main thing is it's philatelists getting together to talk about, explore, socialize about philately.
Hmm.
So I think there's a thread running through every congress that you go to. It's the same when you go to international um, exhibitions and events. Um, you're meeting friends, you're talking about philately. It's just all around the world. And I think that's a special thing about our hobby. It is a hobby where you can go to anywhere in the world and enjoy it.
Definitely. Thank you. Can anyone attend Congress and how much is it to attend?
Yes, we'd be delighted. Anybody can come. They even let me in, so that
Mhm.
shows that it's open to anybody. Costs, can I refer everybody to the ABPS website? Literally, if you just Google ABPS, it'll take you there. There's a specific section for Congress, and it'll give you all the prices, because you can attend just for a day or you can attend for the whole 3 days. There are various prices for various options. So rather than me quote prices and
Yeah,
confuse people,
perfect.
go and have a look on the ABPS website.
That's great. Are the sheets and souvenirs relating to the Congress valuable, and are they popular collecting area for people who attend Congress or other collectors?
We, over the past few years particularly, have tried to produce labels again, and they seem to be very popular when we put them for sale at Congress. Are they valuable? I think you could ask that of anything to any collector, and the reply would be, they're valuable to me.
Hmm.
Um, I have to admit, some of the items I have within my collection, yeah, they're valuable, but
Hmm.
um, I never think about the value. It's just the intrinsic pleasure that I gain from having that collection of
Hmm.
items. But they seem very popular to collect. Just an interesting aside. I was talking about Delarue, I was talking about Harrison, I was talking about Perkins Bacon. I find it quite amusing now that we have them printed by a guy who runs a business in Berlin,
Hmm.
and he produces a lot of material for micronations all around the world. And I just find it amusing that we have all these famous names of printers, and nowadays they're printed by a chap from Berlin.
I've also got very beautiful brochures from the 1920s. Are the Congress labels today just as nice?
I like to think so. Shall we say they're more modern? But I'm sorry, I should have put particularly where are we? 2022. We were in Birmingham and we had a label there with the Birmingham Town Hall as a motif in the middle of the label. And I think that was reminiscent of some earlier labels. But we do try to produce what are pleasant, aesthetically pleasing labels that people would want to take as a souvenir.
Yeah, perfect. And one last question from Joseph Stephen. He said it was really nice to see the early labels cancellations. Thank you for sharing. He said, I have a question. How are individuals selected for the role of distinguished philatelists?
The RDP, rather than me go through it line by line, again, if you go onto the ABPS website and look at, I think it's decorations or medals, there's a piece and it explains the criteria by which signatories for the role of distinguished philatelists are
Mhm.
actually identified. Just
Um,
one more plug, if I
yeah,
may.
yeah, go
Please
for
go
it.
to the ABPS website, have a look at the section Congress, and it'll give you all the details. And um, if anybody's watching this and comes to Congress as a consequence, come up to me and say, Steve, I want that glass of wine or I want that glass of beer that you promised to me. So I'll buy one for you.
We hope to see you at our next Stampex show, at virtual Stampex or in person in London.